Hi, and welcome aboard the Void Century podcast. Adam and Ed here to bring you episode 34 of our podcast. And I just wanted to remind you that after our chapter breakdowns, we have an in-depth discussion and theory. Today we are here to bring you chapter 1155 of One Piece entitled The Rock's Pirates. Ed, take it away.
All right, so we start out with an image of Child Loki confronting the Rock's pirates, or what will become the Rock's pirates, and he looks really cute, and he doesn't have the bandages over his eyes, and he's all, messed up a little bit because he just had that big fall from last chapter. He informs him that his father, Harold, is traveling and isn't in Elbaf because they're asking where his dad is, basically, and he remarks that this is his first time seeing these puny, tiny little humans. Rox D. Zebek gets excited realizing that Loki is King Harold's kid. He didn't even know he had a kid. Rox asks Loki to get an urgent message sent to his father saying, Loki has been seriously hurt. You must return to Elbaf as soon as possible. And he's saying, get that sent out to Rox. And Loki's like, why would I listen to tiny, puny humans? Like, I'm not going to accept orders from you. And also, Loki's kind of in disbelief. He doesn't believe that Harold would actually stop doing what he's supposed to be doing or currently doing and come to help Loki. So he doesn't really think that that's going to happen, even if he does get hurt. So then we learn that Rox has world renown for his swordsmanship, and it's got an impact that is akin to a giant hammer or cannon fire. It was said to blow everything in the surrounding vicinity away. Rox hits Loki and laughs, saying, now Loki's seriously hurt and he can deliver the message. So yeah, Loki goes down. So then we get a time skip to when Rox and Harold cross paths earlier that year during the Reverie. Word is spreading that someone attacked Reverie and kidnapped 5 of the kings. They say a big man in black must be the culprit. We next see Emu, who says that the lives of those kings cannot be used to extort Mu. We see Emu is actually talking to Rox, and Rox responds to Emu saying that he just wanted to throw the Holy Land into chaos. We then cut to the narrator explaining that the events that happened was the first and last of its kind. First, an intruder made their way to the flower room in Maryjois. The man claimed to be a pirate following Davy Jones. He knew there was nothing more he could do, so he just withdrew with these words, just wait, one day, I'll be back.
We then see a shot of Maryjois, and the narrator states that these events would remain unknown to the world. At this time, there was also another intruder in the Holy Land. We see a group of celestial dragons losing their mind and swooning over Harold, while we see guards mobilizing to protect the celestial dragons. We then see Harold seemingly on fire, mouth agape, running away, saying he's sorry the negotiations went a little awry or went south, and he knows trespassing is a crime, but perhaps lighting him on fire and chasing him is just a bit too far. We then see that an admiral was murdered, and we see the guards mobilize to capture the murderer of this said admiral. We see Harold and Rox running towards each other, and Harold is angry because everybody is blaming him for capturing these kings and potentially killing this admiral, and he believes that Rox, the man running at him, is the one that did it. And then we see a shot of Rox remarking on how surprised he is that a giant is in front of him because giants only lurk on Elbaf. We then see a great 2-page spread of Harold using 2 hands to strike Rox with his sword, and Rox seemingly hockeyed up his own sword, and they're clashing, and we see a huge release of Conqueror's Hockey. This is the kind of panel that you would put on a poster. We see the stereotypical clash, two faces on either side, and we then learn that there was a shockwave generated from these 2 strangers at this moment that blew everything away within a 5-kilometer radius. We then see Rox, eyes wild with fury, asking his strong opponent to state his name, and then Harold triumphantly returns with, "My name is Harold." They go ahead and exchange pleasantries during battle, and then say, "Hey, Angle your next right. Rox advises Harold to point his next strike towards the castle because the celestial dragons will enslave him the first chance they get. And Rox basically tells him, hey, don't ask any questions. Rox then asks Harold, how do you get to Elbaf? And Harold points Rox in the direction of the New World, and they vow to meet each other again if they are to escape their fate here. We then see Harold jump off the side of Mary Joie, and Harold's like, I would never associate with a criminal like yourself. We then get a shot of the narrator who tells us that Rox had killed a Navy admiral just moments earlier, and despite all the efforts of the world government, the admiral was to die, and this was to be declared the most grievous of sins. We see a great picture of a wild-eyed Rox D. Zebek, complete with the markings over his eye on his wanted poster. And then the narrator states that in this moment, Rox's infamy soared. He was known all around the world, and that this sent shockwaves throughout the sea. This was big news. We then get another time skip. Sometime later, undisclosed, we see a ship carrying celestial tribute for the celestial dragons was attacked. The gates of justice themselves were destroyed, and the attacker fled the scene. We then learn that these stolen funds were used to support the Rox pirates financially. And we see Rox holding a stack of wanted posters. And it says, at that point, Rox had always acted against the world government. But after that, he started to target pirate crews too. And then we can see Rox, apparently, he used these wanted posters to find the best and the brightest or the strongest of the pirates. And then we learn, we are reintroduced to the Davy Back Fight. And we learn that the Davy Back Fight is a long-standing tradition within pirates where they would compete in games and physical endurance activities, and they would wager their flags, their Jolly Rogers, or even their crewmates themselves. And then we learned that Rox used this tradition to build his entire crew. And Rox basically goes on to state, he's hyping his crewmates up. He's like, hey, just wait until we get to Elbaf. I'm telling you, there's this guy, Harold. He's nuts. He's crazy. He's the strongest guy you've ever seen. And Rox basically says, the narrator states that Rox went ahead and beat a lot of pirates in Davy Back fights and recruited them even before they even had flags themselves. And then we see a shot of the unnamed Rox pirate ship sailing towards the World Tree as the Rox pirates make their way to Elbaf.
All right, so we cut to Elbaf, and we see that Harold has rushed home to take care of Loki, and he's glad that Loki is better, and he says that he knows Loki is strong, but he still shouldn't wander down to the lower realm, the realm of the dead. He says that Loki got lucky escaping after falling, and it's way more dangerous out there, and he could have, ran into some different people, potentially. Loki is surprised Harold came back, and he's thinking to himself how it must just be a coincidence, and it's not because of him. So that next we see Rox and Harold meet for the first time, and we get a big spread of the current Rox's crew. Rox asks Harold to join his crew, and he says that the world government won't hear him out. But Harold is like, I don't want to lose my goodwill with my allies that I already have. I, put so much effort into building these allies. And Rox is like, allies are just pawns, and we need to level the playing field. He says that Elbaf has the greatest warriors, and if something makes your stomach churn, you gotta crush it. Harold says that his people don't need to war with the world anymore. Elbaf has changed. Rox says that people never change. The same bloodlust remains. Whitebeard then tells them to settle down and enjoy their food. Harold tells the Rox crew that they will only be led to ruin following him. So then we get an intro of each of the current Rox crew in their own separate character boxes. So we start with Shiki the Wicked, future Golden Lion. He's laughing and stuffing his face. This time, one of the rare paladins with no cigars in his mouth says that they only care about themselves. They don't care if Rox died. They don't really have loyalty to Rox, is what he's saying. Next, we see Miss Bakken, Buckingham Stussy, the tech bandit, and she's sipping on some wine, says Rox's plan could lead to money, so she's kind of got that like Nami-like vibe there. Next, we see Don Marlin, gangster from the West Blue, and he's smoking a cigar. He's got a typical gangster look with a really big chin. Looks kind of like beige in terms of like what he's wearing and stuff. He talks about Hachinosu, the pirate isle, where exiles and inmates are sent to the isle as punishment. Next, we get to Edward Newgate, Whitebeard. He's eating a bunch of meat and he's sporting a healthy mustache. And he's continuing on about Hachinosu, saying that it was meant to be a barren island where, outlaws are just there to wait for death, marooned on the island. Next, we see the pirate prophet Ochoku, future Commodore of Pirate Island. He's got forked snake tongue and he's got like 4 chins. He says that survivors on Hachinosu started banding together, and he's like, why did that happen? Then finally, the last crewmate we see is Ganzui, the smuggler. He's got round glasses, he's stuffing his face, talking with his mouth full, and he says that Hachinosu has a massive gold deposit, and there's a shadowy organization that found out about it and got involved. It really made those criminals rich and angered the world government.
We get a shot of the full dinner table, and Rox goes on to state that anybody who gets near Hachinosu Island, they get captured, their ships get seized. Rox told the world government he would go ahead and clean up the island for money. He told them that he would split the loot with the world government. However, Rox wants the island and the rest of the criminals on the island seemingly to be his crew. He said at that point he would turn the island into a pirate paradise. Says that at that point the world government wouldn't know what to do with themselves. Rox proclaimed that he's just getting started. And then he goes on to state in a proclamation, this is just the start. He's going to use that island as his base. And in doing so, he's going to crush the Navy and bring the Holy Land. And at that point, he's going to be the king of the world. We see Loki actually sees Rox stating this. Harold, with a mouthful of food, looks at Rox in disgust. He's like, you're crazy. Your enemies are too big. You're literally picking a fight with the whole planet. Rox, indignant with his fist up in the air, says, one day, say what you want. Somebody's going to pull it off. There is no such thing in a power that lasts forever. One more time, he asks Rox to team up with him and join his crew. We then get a shot of Loki admiring Rox and his determination as Harold turns down Rox's invitation again and says, hey, I'm the king, I can't do it. The narrator at that moment states that Loki realized he had found his salvation. We get a cut in which we learn that 4 years later, even though Harold kept rejecting Rox's invitation to join his crew, Rox went on to shake the world, and he would send shockwaves throughout the entire One Piece world. We then get a final panel of the Rox Jolly Roger, and we see it's the word rocks with a skull for the O and a weird flaming swirl motif. And we learn that the legend himself, Rox, has embarked on his journey that will shake the world. And I just can't wait to see exactly what the Rox Pirates do next. I think the setup is fantastic. And I really want to know a little bit more about Rox. And starting with this chapter, I think the way he confronted Emu was really of note. Ed, I think there were some reveals here today that really went on to explain some of Rock's backstory, perhaps, and a little bit more of his motivations. Do you want to touch on that a little bit, Ed?
Yeah, so first off, we learned that he basically claimed to be, a pirate that was inspired by Davy Jones. So yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about Davy Jones. So, there's like a whole like Davy Jones locker, and basically like from what I've read on Wikipedia, I did a little bit of research. I saw that Davy Jones is kind of seen as like the like boogeyman of the sea. So like, if something goes wrong, or if you're trying to put a warning out there for people on the sea, they bring up Davy Jones and stuff like that. So it's kind of just like a mythological boogeyman on the ocean for pirates. And it's also interesting that if he was inspired by Davy Jones, that he also does the Davy Back Fight. So we know that he's got to be like really powerful and strong. I mean, we already saw that clash with King Harold as well. It rivaled that of Odin and Whitebeard later down the line, or, just other very big clashes we've seen in One Piece. It was just as big as those. So the fact that people were blown away 5 kilometers or whatever it was, yeah, it was just really badass. So we know that he's a really strong person. So yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting. Anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. So the thing you may or may not know about pirates and especially sailors in general is they're very superstitious, right? So they won't keep certain pets on board. They won't eat certain foods. They won't allow unlucky people to sail with them. That's a big one. If you're deemed unlucky, then they don't want to sail with you because you could jeopardize the whole operation. And if Davy Jones himself represents this bad luck on the sea, or this boogeyman, if you will, I think it's very interesting if Luffy is supposed to be lucky and always finds himself in positive situations. Perhaps rocks could be a representation of bad luck on the seas and what happens when you become the victim of superstition.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. And that also is kind of like going to bring us up to the next point of he's kind of like the opposite of Joy Boy. So we've brought up the idea of, the chaotic D, the chaotic will of the D, as well as like the good will of the D. So Joy Boy and Nika and Luffy and Roger, they all kind of represent that like light side of the coin, the good side of the D, whereas maybe the Davy Jones types of pirates represent that chaotic will of the D and like the dark side of the coin. We also have Blackbeard who represents that like chaotic D. Also, Eustace Kid kind of represents that chaotic D as well. Law could also represent the chaotic D. He does remove hearts, although Law he's kind of in the middle. I feel like he's got the good side as well. So for him, it's kind of like he kind of represents maybe like he's like half in and half out.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. We're learning more about the will of the D, seemingly by learning more about these people who hold the will of the D. Now, I don't remember if it was explicitly stated that the I know it's stated that the D's themselves are very lucky. However, it's not stated if the D's are also incredibly unlucky as well. So I think it's really interesting to note. We do see a lot of characters in One Piece that hold the D that might be a little diametrically opposed. There you go. So it's very interesting to learn about these characters as they're introduced to. And I think the more we read into it, the more we can kind of infer that maybe some characters we already know that might be a little more chaotic could actually be D's themselves.
Yeah, I like that.
So if we want to move on a little bit from Rox himself and the whole Davy Jones backstory, we know Rox was wanted to marry Joie not only for capturing those 5 kings to use as bargaining chips, but he also killed an admiral, like seemingly easy, like low diffed an admiral. Do you want to speculate as to why he would kill an admiral or what would drive him to do that?
Yeah, so I'm thinking that he was probably attacked by the admiral, most likely trying to protect the monarchs or claim back the monarchs that Rock's already kidnapped. And yeah, I think that that's probably the most likely reason is he was just there to defend and he ended up getting killed.
So a good point I want to make too, if we want to speculate a little bit on what the Admiral's power might be. So we know the Admiral died at Mary Joie, right? However, we also know that the Mera no Mi, I believe, was also a prize at God Valley, if I remember correctly. So perhaps when the Admiral died, his fruit was reincarnated and offered up as a prize for the games at God Valley.
Yeah, that's a good one. The other one I was thinking was the Magu Magu no Mi, the magma fruit, just because we know that Akainu has it presently, so it's within the world government's hands currently. So it's possible that they had it in the past as well.
Who knows? Actually, I just checked it. No, I was incorrect of the Marinomi. I was thinking about Kuma's pawpaw fruit. My apologies.
Oh yeah, it was the pawpaw. Yeah, I was like, I don't remember that, but
It's
yeah, that's
okay.
good.
Yeah, it was offered up at a different game, but I think we should keep in mind that perhaps the prizes at God Valley were previous, at least the fruits that were prizes at God Valley were could potentially have been the Admiral's fruit previously. I think that's something that we could speculate on as well.
Yeah, sure.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Rox's crew and the implications with how his crew was formed?
Yeah, so we already kind of brought up the Davy Back Fight a little bit. So yeah, I guess that in the past it must have been developed by Davy Jones, because again, Rox claims to be, a follower of Davy Jones. So yeah, I think that also it means that Rox has to be a very powerful individual to be able to take out the likes of, Big Mom Kaido, Whitebeard, who are the current Yonko, as well as I'm sure the people that are on his crew are also very powerful. So yeah,
We still haven't seen Silver Axe, but I do know we've speculated a couple times that we thought Rox built his crew due to the Davy Back Fight, so it's good to actually see that this is confirmed. And like you stated too, he has to be incredibly powerful. But also, remember, the only time we've seen a Davy Back Fight in the series was with Foxy, and Foxy was very underhanded in his tactics. So I think Rox as a cheater, combined with the fact that he might be this avatar of bad luck itself, that hand in hand, there's no escape. If he meets you and you're strong, you're his. It's very similar to how Blackbeard collects fruits. Rox collected people, Blackbeard collects fruits.
sure.
So, do you want to go ahead and we can discuss a little bit about fighting amongst the crew? What happens if you build a crew by Davy Back Fight and you don't pick a cohesive group of people who have their own ideas and their own dreams?
Yeah, so they're not going to be unified in their dreams. We already know that they don't really care about Rox's dreams. They're only following him because of his power. They admitted it. Shiki admitted it earlier in this chapter. So they're not really unified in his goal, and they're not unified in helping each other with their goals. They're just unified by power only. And I mean, I think that the story that Oda is weaving is that this is not a successful way to achieve your goals, achieve your dreams. You got to do it with unity and harmony with your friends, your allies, your nakama.
I think it adds a little bit more insight into why Blackbeard would think it would be okay to kill a member of the crew to gain power. Because, again, if you raise a crew that only knows power, and that's basically the law, it's the law of the jungle, Blackbeard would have no problem in killing his own crewmate. And I think Whitebeard perhaps was a disgruntled member of the Rox crew. Perhaps he wanted to leave but couldn't because he wasn't strong enough. And that's why he was so adamantly opposed to harming your crewmates and was looking for something more like a family out of his pirate crew, because I think he was kind of scarred after being on the Rox crew and seeing how they operated and all that infighting. He just wanted really to see what the exact opposite was like what happens if you love your crewmates, right?
Yeah, and I think that he definitely made something out of that dream, and he did create a united family that people, really loved him. I mean, when Whitebeard died, we saw a bunch of his crewmates crying and being very sad about it. So, yeah, I completely agree. We also, let's just really touch up on Shiki. So, the only thing that I really have to add is that it just looks like he came from Wano. Like, we just had the Wano arc, so that's kind of fresh in our minds, but he's got, the same type of, I think the term is kimono or whatever the traditional garb is. But yeah, he's wearing like a traditional samurai attire that the other Wano people wear. So that's really all I got from that.
Yeah, I think he looks good. I just want to comment. I really love the design on his kimono, actually. I think he looks really good young. It's a shame he turns into like a balding man with a mask stuck in his back and like two peg legs, but I guess
True.
I guess poor thing. But Miss Bakken, she's looking great. She's looking pretty awesome. We get her little Epithet, the tech bandit, and the years were not good to her, but thankfully Stussy does exist.
I think that Miss Bakken is like an analog to Nami for sure, because they both really like money. They're both really pretty. And we see the future of, someone who doesn't get to achieve their dreams. She becomes like the old Miss Bakken who, I know, it's just very sketchy. Whereas we've seen future Nami that Oda drew, where she achieved her dreams and where she didn't achieve her dreams. And she'd probably look a lot more like the current Buckingham Stussy present day if she wasn't able to achieve her dreams, I think.
I would say so, 100%. Now, if we want to talk about Don Marlin as well, I think it's also noted that he's a gangster from the West Blue. And the only other gangster we know in the series that loves cigars is Beige Capone, who also happens to be from the West Blue. So perhaps this could be Beige's father. They could be a little bit related. We don't know, but it's very interesting to see another typical gangster or mafia member in the series.
Okay, and then the next one we can talk about is the pirate prophet Ochoku, who is the future commodore of the pirate island. And, just design wise, he looks like a combination of Caribou and Moria. Cause he's got like that size of Moria. He's got like the quadruple chin like Moria, but then he's got that forked tongue and mouth that looks a lot like Caribou. You want to talk a little bit about maybe what kind of prophet Ochoku could be?
I don't specifically know about his prophecy, but it's very interesting that he would be called the prophet itself. I think perhaps he could be called that because he's very skilled when it comes to observation hockey, or maybe he knows about the world government and the ancient history, perhaps. Maybe he even knows about the ancient history and the mural on Elbaf. For all we know, on Elbaf, we could actually see him looking over the mural, and maybe we get a little bit more insight into the Void Century itself. And a prophet is somebody who communes and communicates, I guess, with their god. So we know gods exist in the One Piece world, so I really want to know exactly who his god is, if not Nika or some of the Buddhist gods that we've been introduced to in the series.
Yeah, so if he's related hypothetically to Moria, we know that Moria raises the dead. So maybe it's some sort of god that can raise the dead. And then also, like, just because of his looks, yeah, he might be related to Caribou as well. He might be like Father Caribou or Moria or both. But yeah, that's like the only speculation I currently have, just because Moria raises the dead. So maybe it's some sort of god that has something to do with raising the dead.
So moving on, we could talk a little bit about Gansby the Smuggler. I think his character design is really reminiscent of Lucky Roo. They really have a similar design. The glasses are almost like a one-for-one spitting image. And he's seen stuffing his face full of food and talking nonsense. And that's like easily two of Lucky Roo's favorite things to do. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like it. I'd say that their faces don't look similar at all, but like their body type and, mannerisms and the fact that they have like basically identical looking glasses, that kind of pushes me over the edge. The only thing that I'd say is that Lucky Roo is kind of like normal human size, whereas Gansui is very large. He's, bigger, kind of like just a bigger person. I don't know, like Kuma size, let's say. So like that's the only thing. And like to me, that's a little bit minor because of course he might have a mother that is smaller in stature and he got his height from his mother. So yeah. Yeah, so next I want to move on to Captain John. So Captain John was not pictured in this chapter. He's not in this chapter at all, but we do know that he was part of the Rock's crew. And we also learned about him actually from Buggy the Clown early on in the series because we learned that Buggy's dream is to find Captain John's treasure. So yeah, we know that he got like instructions on how to find the treasure and learn that it actually was hidden on a skull-shaped island. So we only really know one skull-shaped island that's currently in One Piece, which is Hachinosu, and it's, where currently Blackbeard resides. So yeah, like maybe it might have been like buried somewhere underneath Hachinosu. What do you think about that?
I think it would be very hard to get to an island and then dig on it, but we do know that Buggy has insane luck. So I definitely think it's possible. Maybe Buggy made a deal with Blackbeard. Maybe they both are brothers and they just don't even know it. Maybe it's not revealed in the series yet. But I will say, if they are brothers, then family reunions have to be really hard.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because our next topic is actually the Oh yeah, sorry. We can talk about the Blackbeard, or sorry, not Blackbeard, Roxy Zebek's wanted poster. So we see that it doesn't show the amount, what his bounty is, but he does have a pose that is very, very similar to Buggy's wanted poster pose, where they both have their tongue sticking out and they have their hand outstretched in front of their face. So they have the exact same pose. I think it's like mirrored, but like it's just I feel like it's like another breadcrumb, another clue that I'm starting to believe. Like before, I was not sold on this idea, but I'm starting to believe more and more that Buggy might also be Rox's son.
It's definitely possible. You picked up on that right away. I think Buggy himself is extremely chaotic, and we know he has that crazy good luck. So I definitely think it's possible. Now, if we want to talk a little bit about the Rock's Jolly Roger, I thought it was very interesting. It goes against the normal conventions of Jolly Rogers. Now, we touched on this a little bit in our last episode, trying to connect Jolly Rogers to Jaya in a way. But I think it's very weird that there's no crosses. There's no like bones or swords or anything being crossed. And as I noted last week, I believe the crossbones signify X marks the spot and where the treasure would be buried in the One Piece universe. So I think that because there are a lack of crossbones in the Rock's Jolly Roger, then that signifies that Rox was just looking for power. He wasn't looking for the treasure or the ancient history, right?
Yeah, and that kind of falls in place, or sorry, falls in line with the chaotic will of the D theory. Also, it's just we went through the Wikipedia image of all of the different Jolly Rogers in One Piece, and like basically all of them, except for like a handful, like less than five, they all have like a skull in the center, and then they all have like it doesn't necessarily have to be crossbones. It could be like like two books, let's say, or like hands for Nico Robin, or swords, let's say. But like usually it's like intersecting underneath the skull. So that's like, and it's centered on the flag. So that's kind of like the standard. Whereas Rox's flag, the skull is not in the center because Rox is four letters. So it's like a little bit off to one side where the O would be. So it's just a little bit different. Or I should say it's a lot different than all the other Jolly Rogers in One Piece. And then also, let's just talk a little bit about what the skull looks like on Rox's flag. So it looks like there's like flame coming off the top of the skull, and there's like a little swirl in there. And Adam, I know you like talking about the swirl, so I'll hand this off to you.
I just want to say that we do see a lot of spiral or swirl motifs in One Piece itself. And it's always reminiscent when we first see it is the Gomu Gomu no Mi. You'll notice that there are swirls on the outside of the fruits themselves. And even furthermore, when users tend to awaken their fruit, especially when Luffy enters his Gear 5, we see that cloak that he gets on the back of the steam or the energy or whatever it is. And even with Rob Lucci, we see that there are all those swirl motifs over that kind of the scarf that they get on the back of the hockey or the energy or the steam, whatever it is. And then furthermore, we do see in Awakened Devil Fruits themselves, such with Rob Lucci. Again, you go ahead and you get the swirls of the cloak in the background. You also see the swirls are reminiscent a little bit of fire that we've seen with things like the Mother Flame. So it really harkens back to like some primal energy, perhaps. A lot of people back in the early days of the One Piece community thought that the swirls were somehow related to DNA, but it's a lot bigger than that, I believe. I don't have a definitive theory for the swirls themselves. I'm still working that out. But we see that there are swirls and prominent Jolly Rogers of people who are very important to this series. We're talking of people like Rocks that we're just mentioning, right? But even Roger, if you look closely at Roger's Jolly Roger, you see the swirls and the mustache of the Jolly Roger. The Kuja pirates themselves, as Ed denoted, normally you have crossbones in the back, but the Kuja pirates have a bunch of swirling snakes or arms, perhaps. And even Robin has a bunch of swirling arms. So it's very interesting. And one of the reasons why people thought it was related to DNA back in the day is because we see that with the Vinsmoke family. They all have the swirly eyebrows. All the children went through some kind of genetic modification and cloning.
Wait, I want to bring up actually also, this is just off the cuff, but Emu, his eyes they're not swirls, but he does have extra rings in his eyes and his irises. So, I mean, that even though it's not a swirl, I do think that that also probably represents power. Same with Mihawk. I think that, again, even though it's not a swirl, it's just, it's extra rings. If you look at a spiral from the top down, it could be rings, right? So that's kind of why how I'm like linking this together. And we also know that Mihawk and Emu are also kind of very powerful, which leads into the next part.
That's very interesting. Do you think Mihawk and Emu could be related to each other in some way? Now, we don't know the history of Mihawk, but we know that he's very close to Shanks, if anybody.
Yeah, I mean, so we know that Emu's family is the Nerona family. We don't know what family Mihawk is, but we do know that he has a castle that he stays in that Zoro trained under him at. So he's very well off. I mean, it would make sense that has like celestial dragon bloodline potentially. So like we can't rule out that he's not related to Emu, and they are the only two characters that I can think of that have the extra rings in their eyes. So yeah.
Maybe if Mihawk is affiliated with the world government, maybe that's one of the reasons, besides his strength, that the world government tends to leave him alone. Now, I know Mihawk's very strong, but how do you think he would stack up against two admirals or not a celestial dragon, or one of the Gorosei, right? Or even multiple Gorosei?
I think Mihawk was the strongest Shichibukai, and I think that he's probably Yonko or God's Knight level of strength. That's how I feel. So maybe just a little under Gorosei, just because they're like hyper buffed up through Emu. But he could probably stand his own against a Gorosei, but maybe quite not be able to defeat them.
Got it. I would have to agree with you. He's one of the strongest characters in the series that we have yet to see fight. Same with Shanks. I mean, we did see Shanks take out Kid, but that was just one attack, right? We haven't seen him go all out. But if we want to circle back a little bit to the spirals, much like a spiral, right? I just wanted to note some important people to the One Piece story that have swirls in their character motifs. Now, if you remember Odin and Momo, they have like very swirling hair. And if you look at it, it actually kind of spirals towards the end, which is very interesting. Now, you notice as well, if we want to talk about hair specifically and tribes allied with the ancient kingdom, I would love to touch on the minks. And we know that when they see the full moon, they turn Sulong and they transform, at which point their fur goes all white and it gets really bushy and it starts spiraling and swirling, if you will. If you also look at Jinbei, you'll notice as a fishman, he has swirls on his robes. Ryuma himself also had swirl motifs over, I forget the specific name, but it's like a belt they wear over their kimono. And even so, if you read the One Piece chapters and you look at the manga right now, you'll notice that all the narrator text boxes have swirls at the end. Do you think it's just a artistic motif, Ed, or do you think there's a little bit more to it?
Well, we did get that information in that SBS a few years ago about Sanji's eyebrow swirls, and Oda brought up that everyone lives in circles. The sun, the moon, and the earth all spin in circles. And if the earth suddenly stopped spinning, the planet would be covered in tidal waves. It would be terrible. Now remember that Sanji's eyebrows channel the same powerful circular energy reflect upon this. So, yeah, like basically Oda is saying that these swirls represent power in the world of One Piece. I honestly didn't notice it in the narrator's boxes, so that's a good catch. It's a nice stylistic choice, but yeah, like that's kind of fun to think about. I don't think that necessarily has anything to do with the story other than it's just a stylistic choice in the narrator boxes. But yeah, just the fact that he brought up the earth, the moon, and the sun, and if the earth stopped spinning, we'd get tidal waves, and yeah, it's just interesting to think about.
Do you think that perhaps at the Void Century, with the killing of the sun and the death of Joy Boy that ended this war, do you think the earth actually stopped spinning momentarily and that caused the seas to rise?
Ooh, that's interesting to think about. It's possible. I also know that there's a lot of different like maelstroms and spinning things in the water already in One Piece. Like actually, Adam, you found this early in One Piece when Luffy first sets off to sail. He gets stuck in like a whirlpool, right?
Yeah, he gets stuck in a whirlpool. It's just, I love how Oda sets these things up for us. And the more you look, the more you see.
And yeah, we've seen countless whirlpools in the One Piece universe. I can't really think of them off the top of my head exactly, but I just know we've seen a bunch of them. So it's like very common in this universe. So yeah, it might have to do with something with messing with the spin of the Earth's rotation to cause them, because that is kind of what Oda just hinted at in that SBS.
Now, I want to keep in mind, too, this is an SBS from, I think it was chapter 55, 53. So we're really reaching back in time, guys. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate Oda leaving these breadcrumbs for us. And that's why I love the series so much.
Yeah, I agree. It's so fun to go back and see all the little things that he hit along the way. All right, so moving forward, let's talk about Loki possibly joining the Rock's crew. So we know that Rox really, really, really wants King Harold to join his crew, and I just don't see it happening. There's no hint that Harold has any inkling to even join the crew, and it kind of goes completely against his moral compass. So due to that, Rox might settle for Loki, this young kid who really looks up to Rox and his ideals. So I'm thinking that he might potentially join Rox's crew against Harold's wishes. What do you think about that?
I mean, the sea calls to him. What more can you do? I think this is going to be something that's going to happen. I think Loki is going to leave the island. I think it benefits all parties, and I think it makes it even more sad that Loki finally comes home from his long journey with Harold's quote-unquote friend to really understand how Loki shook the world up. And he gets home and he is really excited to tell his dad about everything he's done and everything he's seen outside, only to see his father being executed. Ugh.
Yeah, and that's actually part of what I'm speculating is that maybe that was Loki's return after being part of Rox's crew, that he comes back home. Maybe it might have not been, the crew might not have disbanded yet. He was just coming home to visit to see what's going on after sailing with Rox. But yeah, another thing that I wanted to point out was that Loki's ideals really do kind of overlap with Rox. We see that he cares about power. He doesn't respect Harold, son, Hadrudin, his half brother, because he's smaller and weaker. And Loki really seems to embrace the same type of ideals that young Harold embraced, which was, I'm bigger, I can just bully everyone around and get my way because I'm stronger than everyone. And that's literally how Rox operates. So there's a lot of overlap in those ideals.
Yeah, it seems like they're really ideologically aligned, and we see that Loki definitely looks up to Rox with admiration. So I think it's a no-brainer. I definitely think Loki is going to join the crew. I wanted to circle back a little bit because we saw King Harold meeting with Rox, and now Harold was on fire and running away from somebody and something. Do you want to speculate a little bit as to like why he was on fire? Was it the Marijois defense systems? Was it an admiral? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, so this might be potentially an admiral, potentially again the Magu Magu no Mi user, the magma fruit, and that user might have been the one that died. So it kind of circles back with that theory that they already had control of the Magu Magu no Mi back then, and they probably stored it, recovered it from the dead admiral and gave it to Akainu eventually. That's what I'm thinking. But again, there's not much evidence. We don't really have much to work with other than the fact that King Harold is on fire.
So I don't recall if we've seen it, but I think much like the CP9, once you get to a certain point, the government bestows you with a devil fruit. Now, the government is a powerful organization, and the world government knows the forbidden knowledge. They know how and why devil fruits reincarnate. I think it would only make sense that these are probably fruits that have been with the world government for centuries. And every time an admiral is disposed of or dies in the line of battle, their fruit gets reincarnated and they give it to the next one, which makes me feel a little gross. The world government's kind of gross.
Yeah, I'm not a fan, and I don't think you're supposed to be. All right, so let's move forward to Gunko. So we see Gunko in the flashback, and she's got long hair. She's wearing this like black veil. She's got a face covering, and we see her bowing to Emu in the flower room. Yeah, I think that she looks pretty cool with the long hair. It's similar to when she transforms into her demonic form, her hair grows out longer. So it maybe that's just Emu's type. He likes the long hair. I don't know, because the fact that she had shorter hair and then it grew out when, she transformed and was speaking with the voice of Emu. Maybe that's just his thing. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Are you insinuating that she is... I think she looks really good with the long hair, but I thought you were insinuating that she was Emu's vessel in some way. Now, we do see her, like, bowing to Emu in the flower room. And I kind of thought that was interesting to note. I thought perhaps that this might be a ceremony or maybe her approval as a god's knight to achieve her knighthood, if you will. Because I imagine if you become a god's knight, then you would know who Eam is, and then you would have to be approved by Eam himself, or just disposed of at that moment. But it seems very interesting, the relationship Emu seems to have with Gunko, right?
Yeah, so I do think that she actually might be a vessel of Emu because he did speak through her. It was clearly not her speaking. It was Emu speaking through her as a vessel potentially. So yeah, I do believe that. And also, we know that God's knights do typically age because we saw Shamrock. No, Shamrock's dad. What's his name again? Sorry.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, I'm drawing a blank.
Saint Garling. There we go. Saint Garling.
Garling Figurland, yes.
Yeah, so we see Garling Figurlin, he ages and he was a God's Knight. So Gunko doesn't age. So even though her title is God's Knight, and this might have been her knighting ceremony, she doesn't age. So she's something special. She's something above a God's Knight. And we don't really know what that is. We don't know what that is because she's not even the leader of the God's Knights. So there's something special with with Gunko.
Yeah, her character design is even really special as well. So I assume if she doesn't age, she must have Imu's favor, similar to the Goro say, right? Once you have Imu's power, you stop aging, or once you lose it, you disappear in flaming fashion and you turn to bones. So I think it's very interesting. Like, is she a personal attendant? Is she a vassal? Is she some kind of like family friend of the Nerona family? Could she even, could she herself have been around during the time of the Void Century and the Great War? Do you think she supports Emu, or is she just influenced by him?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell because there's a lot of contradictions with Gunko. First off, she's got heterochromia, so she has two different colored eyes, which kind of signify two different, I guess, conflicting personalities or ideologies that she currently has. So that might reflect her, being controlled against her will by Emu. And because he does take over her body. And yeah, I do think that she's being influenced by what you like to call Conquerors 2.0, what I like to be called being flipped by the Othello board flipping. So I call it being flipped. You call it Conquerors 2.0. So yeah, I do think that she is being used. And then we had a flashback of her as a child. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, just when Emu took over her body, I think it was noted by the narrator that there was a flashback of like a little girl with somebody who looked like Brooke, had like a big afro, and they were like walking away. So I think it would be very interesting if Gunko had some kind of relationship with Brooke, at least when she was little. And that would, of course, support the theory that she is much older than her physical appearance would indicate. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, Brooke is like 150 years old, bag of bones. Yo ho ho ho.
So that means that Gunko, my thought is because we saw her as a child, she probably wasn't alive in the Void Century, but she's probably, you know, she's definitely, she's probably closer to 150 years old of age. I mean, she's younger than Brooke, so she's going to be younger than him. But yeah, I don't think that she's, 800 years old. So yeah. And yeah, it's just cool that she likes Brooke's music. But so Brooke's music, what's interesting is it's all about, being with friends and just very positive, very Nika-like, very happy, preaching freedom, that type of stuff. But also, a few chapters ago, she revealed that her fear is Nika as well. So is her fear actually Nika? Or maybe was that Emu talking out of her?
That's very interesting. Now, did she speak it aloud? They say always beware what you say aloud. Or
Yeah,
did
she
she say
spoke it
it
out
to
aloud.
herself?
I'd have to
Ooh.
double check, but I'm pretty sure she spoke it out loud with the other holy knights.
You have to be careful what you wish for. So, I don't know. I feel pretty bad for Gunko because she's about to meet Nika pretty soon in the flesh.
Yeah, well, maybe she already. Well, oh yeah, true, because she hasn't met Luffy yet. Okay, so we have something kind of exciting to reveal, guys. We appreciate you all sticking around with us, but me and Adam, I think that we figured out where the One Piece is located. And before you get your hopes up, this is still very much a cook and we're still ironing out the fine details. But I feel pretty confident that we know what the actual location is. And yeah, we've mixed some breadcrumbs in the last couple of episodes about where it might be. So maybe more attentive audience members and listeners might know where it is already. But yeah, you want to kind of talk a little bit about we're not going to give it away right now, but maybe talk a little bit about it.
We definitely won't give it away, but thanks for everybody to staying till the end. And this isn't some kind of enticement so you can go ahead and listen to our next chapters or find the secrets within the secrets yourself. However, I think that tying a few themes in our previous chapters, especially around certain facial markings and certain symbols that pirates tend to carry and their connection to certain geographic locations, I think is very important. And I think it satisfies the two criteria of making Roger laugh. And we even know why Roger would have been too soon to fulfill whatever the prophecy is. So it does pass those two tests. It also is supported by some other things in the One Piece universe that we know is connected to the ancient kingdom. Think things like Bink's sake or some other themes that we have seen present among pirates. So I'm very excited to do more research and flesh this out for you all. But I'm 99% positive that I know where the One Piece is. And for the final part of it, it's just something that is very Oda-like. And I would be surprised if he ever passed up the opportunity to rub the location of the One Piece in all of our faces every time we even think about the series. So it seems something a masterful writer would do. And Oda himself is a god.
I'm really excited to talk about it. We'll talk about it one of these future weeks where there's a break in chapters. So we'll bring it up then. But yeah, just give us a few more weeks to flesh it out and we'll get that out to you guys. And yeah, we're just really excited to talk about it.
Yes, we're going to make sure that we do all our research and tighten everything up, but we can't wait to present it to you guys. We are planning on doing it on a break week. So keep tuned. I can't necessarily commit that we're going to have it ready by the next break, but I'm so happy to present it to you all. And with that, this has been episode 34 of the Void Century podcast. I just want to remind you all to please listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Here to remind you all, we post all of our programs to YouTube if you would prefer to listen to us there. You can also find shorts of some of our better theories on TikToks and Instagram Reels. See you on the next voyage, and thank you for sailing with us.
Bye.